Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my weekly behind-the-scenes, DM-only live stream Crafting Annihilation, which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Tomb of Annihilation. If you're playing characters Mannix, Kales, Gillian, George, or Theron, do not tune in. Do not listen, even though some of you might be upstairs right now. This video is not meant for you, but for the rest of you, welcome. We stream our Tomb of Annihilation sessions live on YouTube every Friday evening. You can watch all of our D&D live series as well as reviews and Let's Plays on my YouTube page and read weekly session recaps at roguewatson.com. You can follow me on Twitter at roguewatson and join our official Discord discussion group with invite link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to platinum patrons Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Chris, and Alberto. And gold patrons RPG Paper Crafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos Did, Vicente Gilberto, Sean A.K. Cert 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, and Jerome. Thank you all very much for your support. For our campaign, we use Roll20.net. For streaming, I use Open Broadcaster software with Streamlabs. Hope everybody's doing well this week. I am getting real shaggy. Why am I so yellow? What is going on? Oh, the sun came out. The sun came out with a vengeance. Hang on one second. Man. It's the return of the sun. Jeez. This is the, I love having my desk right in front of a nice window facing east, but it does involve some complications when it comes to trying to set the camera right. Let's get that white balance a little bit better, Lord. Okay. Get rid of that lovely yellow filter. A little more normal. I think we can actually go a little bit further. Nope, that's too blue. I don't want to be blue. Oh, badu bee, badu bye. Okay. Hopefully the sun will cooperate. Nope, let's lower the color intensity, the gain. Fuck it, we're gonna do it live. All right, good enough. Good enough. So as I mentioned, in the future, I'm gonna be splitting up these Crafting Annihilations, whatever they'll be called next, into two different streams. One will be the recap, and one will be the actual preparation stream, but I don't want to change that until we're actually done with Tomb of Annihilation. So we're still doing both with this live stream. So to which, and yeah, we're going to be talking all about this upcoming huge mini boss fight that my players are going to be involved in tomorrow night, which is exciting. But first, we're going to recap the rest of level 3. So the revolving drummed. Oh, we talked so long about the that iron guillotine, which my party immediately identified how that worked. All these different skill checks and things about it. And then George immediately got a crit on like lifting it up. So I was like, all right, well, that's done. That's one less thing I'm going to keep track of. You shove that shit right up into the wall and that will never come down again. Something that I did after the fact, based on all of our discussions, because we did talk quite a bit about this room, which was let me scroll down a little bit because our cameras are covering. The Winds of Pandemonium room. And I actually I liked the idea of the magical darkness to make it more of a chasm, which added a bit of, you don't know what's down there or what the drop is. And it just feels more like a classic, almost like a platforming video game moment. And of course, one of the players was immediately like, this is like a Sonic level or something, which is pretty fun. And I actually covered everything up, and then I created tokens of the platforms so that I could then raise them individually. These are all in the GM layer. And then the idea is when the lever was pulled, this first one would rise up. And then as you stepped on one, another one would rise up. So it's kind of a bit of a leap of faith thing happening. And we still would have done all the checks and stuff that we talked about. But because my party is so bad at strength checks, what's interesting is they did figure out the deafen thing. So like if they deafened themselves, which Mannix does have that, which how often does that come up? Do you actually use blindness, deafness to deafen things? It just doesn't seem like it happens that often. So it's kind of a neat use of that spell in order to stop the whole like madness thing from happening. And the problem is Mannix doesn't have the strength to jump. So it was a really interesting situation where he had to use deafness. And originally, and they were thinking, okay, well, let's put it on George so that he can jump across. And then finally George is like, "Oh, wait, I'll just use my helper monkey." He's got a flying monkey to fly across because we established that the winds doesn't really screw up the actual movement too much. It just kind of creates that mental anguish of the really high level wisdom saving throw and the madness affliction. And so I just ruled, all right, that's cool. The monkey just basically flies across because the key was they actually did cast deafness on the monkey. So Mannix ended up using two spells, once on himself to kind of see what everything was, and then because they didn't see what happened originally, because George was all the way back here and he doesn't have the sight, so I didn't even explain the platforms. And then once they made it back there and Mannix was, they were trying to figure it out, and then they used the monkey. I was like, that's honestly, I think that's a fine solution. Like, yeah, I had all this stuff prepped, but I did kind of like the way that the players used, the tools at their disposal and spells that they had. So I do like that even if they solve puzzles in kind of an easy way, as long as they're expending resources to do it, it still feels like an appropriate challenge. So ultimately, I thought this one was a decent room. I still like the idea I had fourth. Am I bummed that they didn't technically engage with it? Maybe a little bit, but also we didn't have to worry about all the fiddly like jumping rules and stuff that I was going to have to keep track of and figure out how many skill checks were involved and all of that. So, and I kind of teased the fact that because Mannix can't normally jump that far, it would involve skill checks. And again, they couldn't see the bottoms. They were like, okay, we don't even know how this is going to work. So I thought that was still pretty fun, even if it didn't quite get used as the platforming video game leaping sequence that I expected it to be. Hello, Arno and Furnace, Jordan, Lumpy, Jerome, Nick, Fireworks. Happy St. Beholder's Day. Indeed, indeed. Yeah, I likes the Phantasmal Force. He tried to use Phantasmal Force on a fucking golem, by the way, and it literally says in the description it does not affect constructs. Which brings us to this room. I actually kind of liked the way the players worked through this. I felt like it was a pretty good balance between uh, none of it was necessarily confusing. It was like, okay, we know how these things work. We can turn them. I tried to be pretty straightforward about the fact that they can turn, and they only turn one direction, and you click it, and then something happens. It was a pretty easy cause and effect. The only thing they got hung up on was, okay, if we turn one statue, people go in there, and then we turn the other statue. How do we know who comes out? And the truth is, as written in the text, it's random. So you literally just roll, which I tried to tease that publicly because I felt bad that the players were spending so long trying to figure out like how that left statue works, that I actually publicly had me and I think Mannix do a roll off because I ran into a weird situation where it says, it teleports random creatures out of the room, but this inanimate clay golem statue, which I guess is a clay golem, so it is a creature. It's just in an inanimate form. If there's no enemies around it, can be teleported out. Once it destroyed Mannix's frog, which reverted back to its wondrous figurine, does that then get teleported out? And I struggled with that during the show because I wasn't sure how to rule that. And then the players kind of helped me with that because they were saying, well, it teleported the statue out. Surely it would teleport the inanimate frog out. So ultimately I decided, okay, I guess the frog does count as a thing that would be teleported out. But I tried to explain that because we did that little roll off, it was just completely random on who actually got teleported outside. So, but they had a good system. I didn't try to roll initiative or anything. They, were able to ready actions, and between like mage hand and just basically turning the thing as soon as the golem pops out, they were able to get that key right off of them. And then that was phase 2 of the plan, which was how do you get down there and actually open the chest? And George had a great solution, which is using Moa's power to turn invisible at will, which is something he hasn't actually used too much, but this was a good use of it. And then instead of, and the other problem was, of course, getting him out, but he had the teleporting cape from the pirate captain. So that's only a once per day, which is why he mentioned like how long have we long rested since then. So that was a good use of that because he could just teleport out. You can teleport, so you don't have to worry about the golem coming out. So I think they did a really great job. There was that bit of like experimentation that kind of bit them in the ass. Mainly, Celeste got her butt clobbered by the really strong attacks, and it's got a really frightening ability on it too. I don't know if this is true of all clay golems or just this one, but it can haste itself, which is bizarre. I wasn't even sure how to like describe that. I was struggling with my descriptions pretty badly. Um, and then it can when it hits you, you have to roll. You have to make a not easy con save, and then your hit point maximum is reduced by the same amount of damage taken. And then it lasts until a greater restoration spell is used. That's terrible, and it seems like such a weird like extra thing for a like, I'm not sure thematically why the clay golem does just that. It's not like it's life draining or anything like that. It's just I don't know. It's weird. I did not, and honestly, and unfortunately, we didn't get to this room on Crafting Annihilation last time, so I didn't really look at this creature very heavily until like basically we almost went live, and I was like, "Holy crap, this thing is really painful." And the players, the funny thing is they did unleash it first. It attacked, and then they immediately sent it back down. So they knew how strong this thing was, and wisely decided to not try to attack it if they could help it. So that it was just a good combination of I still, and that was the only really fight we had I think in the last 2 sessions, and it was only that one round. So I enjoyed the way that entire room worked out. Honestly, I liked the little bit of combat there. I liked the way the players worked through the puzzle, and I liked the way they had to expend some resources to do it. So honestly, I was a big fan of how both of these rooms ended up happening. They found the door to the vault, and of course, they were still missing. Well, at that point, they were missing 3 keys because they hadn't done the chasm room yet. When they got that one, they got 2 keys. And yes, for those of you that have run Tomb of Annihilation, or if you're familiar with it, then they should have had 10 by now, but I actually changed it. I moved one of them from, I believe it was the corpse in Aijen's tomb, and I moved it to be in the Veils of Fear room here because I figured I wanted to put something worthwhile in that room because it can be a very nasty room. It's a fun room. It's just a pure like horror, uh, you know, pain room, and otherwise there's just a bit of like treasure in there, which I guess treasure's still good. But I wanted to put one of the crystal eyes in there as well. So that was a change that I made. So I kind of montaged them coming back to the original area, which they were originally here until the whole golden skull thing happened, and they raced across and did the entire rest of the level. So I inadvertently, because of crazy things that happened like 3 sessions ago, kind of pulled them away from this first 2 rooms and then did all the rest of the dungeon and then came back into these 2 rooms. Kubazan's shrine is pretty easy, probably the most boring and lame of the shrines, if we're being honest. It's just pure, like, following direct. It's just, they make it very, very obvious on what to do. As long as your players are paying any kind of attention, I mean, they give you all the right items in front of you. They show, like, what items you need. The only thing that could have been a little confusing is the, maybe, like, the headless chicken part and the fact that you need blood instead of just like bones or something. And of course, Celeste did that amazing and fucked up thing of cutting off Orvix's finger to actually land in the bowl, just to make sure they had bone, blood, flesh, everything in there. So uh, I would still love that plan of like turning Orvix into a revenant at some point to hunt down the players and swear vengeance on them. He hasn't died yet, but I'm thinking maybe he might die during the Beholder fight. Unfortunately, the Beholder doesn't actually have AoE attacks. It just has a whole lot of targeted attacks. So, and I don't see any way of Orvix going in there, at least initially. But I don't know. Maybe if I'm feeling like things are going a little, it's a way to balance that fight, I guess, would be to target Orvix with one blast. And even then, I mean, I think you only have like a 30% chance or so of it being an actual like pain blast. But if it's anything like the random ass rolls I rolled for the touching the purple mold and having those eye beams shoot out, I was nailing those damage rolls every single time, which is really weird. I don't know why. But anyway, they were able to do Kubazan's Shrine just easily. Unfortunately, Michelle hasn't been able to join us for a couple weeks, so they decided to just give her the spirit, which I guess everybody at this point is pretty happy with theirs. So I don't know if how much we'll engage with like level 4 shrines, for example, other than the players do seem like they want to do all the things. But it's interesting that everybody seems to be fairly happy with uh with the trickster gods that they have. Theron would probably be the one that would be the least satisfied, but we haven't really role played it up too much. Although coming up, it'll probably be some major role plays between the trickster gods. Obolaka would obviously be terrified of this situation. Um, and unfortunately, it's just the easiest one to role play and impose upon the player because it's somebody that was like just slacks you with fear and you don't want to, go into that room. But she actually made the charisma save and did not become possessed, which was the first time that's happened, I believe. Which her being a bard would, of course, make her the best use of that. Interestingly enough, the bracers of archery would actually do really well for her normally because she does use a crossbow, but unfortunately, I think they only actually help you with bows. Yeah, it says you have proficiency with the longbow and short bow, and you gain +2 bonus to damage rolls on ranged attacks made with such weapons. So it lets you suddenly use a longbow or short bow and gain uh, extra damage. But the problem is she's got the crossbow feat, which she takes advantage of a lot. She tends to do a 1-2 punch of like blade and crossbow attack. So I'm thinking I may edit these right now and just make it um, so that they would work for crossbow. I don't that wouldn't unbalance things too much, right? It still requires attunement. You gain a +2 bonus to damage rolls on ranged attacks made with I could just say ranged weapons. Let's just say made with ranged weapons, because that way it would basically just give her +2. It's not to attack though; it's just to damage, so it's not giving you a full like +2 to everything. But that way, it's at least something that would be kind of cool for her. Um, that was Kubazan's shrine, so that could have been a fight, but they did everything correctly there. And again, that's kind of a lame room, I think. And then 43 was the Veils of Fear, which was Mannix, for whatever reason, was the one to go through. I thought it was a neat scene to describe, where you go through these curtains and they become increasingly like messed up and scary until you get to the third one and it tries to cast fear on you. And if you withstand that one, you get to the final one, and then he failed the wisdom save despite having, I think, advantage and using inspiration. I believe he failed all those times. He had a portent die, but he decided not to use it. I think maybe he was deciding what was going to happen. And it's a really scary moment because you put your head in this boar and it chomps down. I think he had near full health, and he has a ton of health anyway. He's got like 80 some hit points. So it wasn't a danger of being auto killed. And he was the only one there. So it actually worked out for the party for once that like one person went in a room and did a thing. And then he used his portent die to then auto succeed on this trap, which means I think he's only got one left, unless he used that one. I haven't actually kept track. Does he? He writes them down on pieces of paper, if you notice. So I don't know if he actually keeps track of his portent die on his character sheet anywhere. I have not been keeping track of which ones. He does call it Papa's power. That's hilarious. I don't know. Let's see, portents. It just lists. Okay, so it doesn't actually list which ones he's got left. I don't know. I'd have to go back to the tape, but I don't know if he's got one left or what the hell it even is. But that would be useful for this upcoming fight, which we are now going to discuss. Um, the party has not long rested in a long time. They were not going to get a long rest until after this fight, assuming, of course, they survive it, which would then be a great opportunity to level them up to 10. So that's the plan, is for them to fight this mid-dungeon boss fight, which I think is a cool thing. It's been a very thematic level with collecting the eyes and having eyes shoot out of the mold and all that happen, which was really fun. Obviously, I've been teasing the crap out of this beholder. This room is fascinating. It's got its own unique trap, which is cool. Hello, Aussie. Um, the floor is perfectly polished and reflective, which means, let me actually pull it up. So if you are shoved against your will, I believe you keep sliding along it. But if you're just starting your turn on the floor, you just fall prone. So it's not as bad as it seems, and it's a pretty easy deck save, but it's the entire room. So anytime you start your turn uh, on the floor, which is anywhere in this circle, you have to make a dexterity saving throw, DC 10, or fall prone. That's not that big of a thing. It just slows people down because you have to spend half your movement to stand back up. And normally that has rules about advantage and disadvantage, but oddly enough, the beholder doesn't have uh, attack rolls. It's all saves. It's all saves. See conditions prone. So the creature has disadvantage on attack rolls. So for some reason you're still prone and you attack, you would have disadvantage. And attack rolls against the creature has advantage if the attacker is within 5 feet. Otherwise, the attack roll is disadvantage. So it actually would hurt the beholder if it actually had ranged attacks, but it doesn't. It's pure saving throws. It just fires beams, and you have to dodge them. So the floor thing is weird. This is a really weird artistic rendition of a sphere under a black drape. So it's the middle of the chamber. A large spherical object hovers under a black silk drape 20 feet above the floor. And it's supposed to tease that there's a beholder under there. And I want to have a monologue sequence as the players step into this room. I know beholders aren't supposed to be able to speak common, but come on, like, you got to have fun with that. It's still going to be able to speak common. Most intelligent creatures would expect would be able to speak common at some point. So, and it's going to tease the fact that it's like, and I'm gonna try to tease the fact that the beholder is like dumb, and I'm gonna have that really stupid voice of that lispy, kind of brutish voice. Um, it's you ugly creatures have unlocked the sanctum of Belcour, the beautiful. That's that kind of voice, and it's gonna have, there's this hovering ball under this black drape, and it's gonna say like, I'm invisible, and I'm hoping the player's like, okay, this thing is, an idiot, and it's right under there, and I'm hoping it draws them in, and they maybe start stabbing it or doing something that's gonna basically pull them out of it. Now, I need to look up what George's True Sight actually does. Does it let him see it? True Sight, I don't think it gives you X-ray vision. A creature with True Sight can, out to a specific range, see in normal and magical darkness, see invisible creatures and objects, automatically detect visual illusions, and succeed on saving throws against them, and perceive the original form of a shape changer or a creature that is transformed by magic. And you can see into the ethereal plane. That's a lot of things. But, correct me if I'm wrong, but True Sight is not necessarily X-ray vision. So you can't see through objects. You can see invisible objects. But for example, if an invisible creature was behind, a wall or a door or a table, to where it could hide itself, it doesn't let you still see through solid objects, which this black drape I would rule would be a solid object. So the only thing you would be able to see is that is in fact a black drape covering something that looks spherical. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, if the beholder gets within 30 feet of George, he will be able to see it perfectly fine. And the thing is, the beholder is invisible, and it was given the invisibility by a wish spell via a Serac, which means it is permanently invisible. Now, we need to discuss invisibility rules, and that's something I actually posted to the Discord chat because this seems to be a very nebulous, often confused rule in D&D 5e, and it's a bummer that that 5e still has these kind of confusing rules in it, the way the mechanics work. Like invisibility, for example, doesn't seem to mean the same as like hiding. It just means, well, let's see if we can look up what it says in here. Conditions invisible. An invisible creature is impossible to see without the aid of magic or a special sense. For the purpose of hiding, the creature is heavily obscured. The creature's location can be detected by any noise it makes or any tracks it leaves. Well, Flying Beholder is actually pretty good for that because it's not leaving any tracks. And then obviously the easiest rule is that attack rolls against the creature have disadvantage and the creature's attacks have advantage. Unfortunately, again, Beholder doesn't actually have attack rolls unless it goes up and bites somebody. And if you're doing that, you've probably already lost the fight because why the hell is a Beholder biting people? So here's the question. How do you rule, and I will pose this to all of you watching, how do you rule when an invisible creature Normally, when an invisible creature attacks, it becomes uninvisible. That part's easy, right? Like, that's a condition of invisibility, is it typically ends when you make an attack. However, this because of the situation this beholder is in, it's got a special version of invisibility wished upon it. It is permanently invisible. So, if you have a flying, floating creature shooting laser beams at you, but it's invisible, how would you rule how well players can detect where it is? Because I would imagine they're gonna press me on that. If it's an invisible creature, but it's once it starts firing its laser beams, they're gonna be like, okay, can we just see where the laser beam came out of? And I don't want to make it too mechanically confusing. I could, you can either. So I'm tempted to either rule like you can't see it, it's invisible, or you can see it since it fired its beam. But you could rule that even though it attacked, it has moved since then. So you could always say that the thing has moved. The other thing is that the beholder, through its middle eye, projects this gigantic, long, anti magic cone. Now, is this something that you can perceive? Can you see this cone happening? In which case, you could trace like where it's coming out of, for example. So the problem is this particular creature, even though it's not leaving tracks behind and it's probably not making a whole lot of noise, it is a fucking light show of just shit coming off of it. So I feel like that would be not too difficult to try and figure. Like, again, just trying to do some realistic stuff in here. I can ultimately decide how to rule it, but I want to make sure I have firm rules in place about how the visibility thing works. And y'all are blowing up the chat, which is good. Greater invisibility is not lost. That's true. You still always know the location of invisible creatures unless they use a hide action. Yes, Andy, and that's something that bugs me. Invisibility has a weird ruling here. It's almost like invisibility isn't. There's different kinds of invisibility, I guess. It's like invisibility in the D&D world is like stealth cloaking technology instead of magical invisibility. Like when I think of magical invisibility, you think of like the Harry Potter cloak or something where they just fucking disappear completely. But if you think of like stealth cloaking technology, then you think of like the Predator where you can kind of see, like the outline and the movement if you're tracking them, if you just know where to look. And I think the latter, oddly enough, which is typically more associated with sci-fi, but that's like the ruling that D&D tends to fall into, at least 5th edition. Perception checks versus, you mean versus stealth? Could try to chase the attacks. Yeah. Just give it a disadvantage to the players. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do is just say, yeah, you can target him, but you're going to always have disadvantage on targeting it. Now there are a couple solutions to the invisibility problem. One of them is you can use Dispel Magic. You can use Dispel Magic, which will permanently turn off its invisibility. And Theron does have Dispel Magic and has used it before. However, it is because it was he was rendered invisible via a wish spell. It's a DC 19. So you cast Dispel Magic, then you have to make a DC 19, whatever your spellcasting ability is, which if Theron it would be Wisdom. I think he's got a +4. So he would have to roll a 15 or higher to successfully turn off the invisibility permanently. That is not a gimme. I don't know what the odds are of that. I'm not a math person, but that is something that he could do, though, and that would be the best single thing they could do because it would permanently turn off the invisibility. Now, Gillian also has Fairy Fire, which would be the easier thing to do because the Beholder, unfortunately, I believe, does not have Legendary Resistance, which I'm tempted to give it to him because I feel like a lot of bosses should have that. But rules as written, he does not have Legendary Resistance, and his deck save, which I believe is Fairy Fire, oddly enough, I guess you're dodging the fairy things. He's shitty at deck saves. He's only got a +2. So odds are he's actually not going to make a deck save against Fairy Fire. So Fairy Fire would light him up and would cancel out the disadvantage. So I would rule that it doesn't make him have advantage. It just cancels out his disadvantage. And that would give him that cool, like, he's invisible, but you can see like the outline of a color. However, Fairy Fire requires concentration, and that would put a big target on Gillian, and he would definitely want to shoot all those eye beams at her, because guess what? We finally have an intelligent monster to use, and it would certainly use all that. I'm also going to tease the fact that it has been watching the players for the entire time they've been in level 3. That's those little eye stalks popping out, which I haven't done a good job in the last session of doing that, but I meant to have all these eye stalks popping out and looking at the players. But that is literally the beholder spying on them. So it knows the players, it knows their tactics, it knows who, I mean, you can assume too by looking at, that's the fighter, that's the spellcaster, I think also. But specifically, it knows kind of a little bit about what the creatures are capable, or what the party is capable of, and what the things at least that they've done. It would know that. In fact, I need to roll hit points for this guy, don't I? If you throw dust at it, you can see the outline. Yeah, maybe. Can anybody throw? I don't think you could throw. So the other thing is, I forgot to mention, the dome has a 50-foot ceiling, and all of the eye rays have a 120-foot range. So you can bet your sweet bippy that I'm having this sucker float near the ceiling, firing down at the players, staying well out of reach of George's goddamn thorn whip, which has been the bane of my existence. It's still a really cool item. I'm glad I gave it to him because he's done really cool stuff with it. But it definitely can create some problems. I'm not going to make the mistake I did with the dragon of keeping it near the ground and being able to be pummeled in melee attacks. The party does not have great ranged attacks at all. A lot of its main damage is from Kaless and George in melee, and to some extent Mannix doing the Shadow Blade thing, and then Theron morphing. Like, all those things are melee. So if it stays well out of melee range, it's just going to float up in the air and firing down these rays left and right. They do have Fairy Fire. Invisibility says you can track an invisible creature by the sounds and footprints. The beholder is floating. Unless it speaks, it's silent. Yes. All good points. Well, which leads me to the fact that I don't know if I even want to I don't know, but does that render this fight like completely like to where the players are like, nope, we're going to get the fuck out of here? Now, there's a reason they have to actually make their way in here. And that's because, got it, 3 windows open. When they first get in this room, they will find the blasted remains of the skeleton key from this level that they need. So, technically, they don't need to actually fight this boss, but you do need to be able to grab this key part in the. That's like the thing you need. Now, there is treasure all over this outside, so it obviously behooves the players very well to grab all this treasure and fight the boss. So, but it's not like a hard stop either. It's not like you technically have to beat this boss. You just have to get this one key from, and I'm going to literally have it be blasted. Like, the key somehow, I don't know how, got in this room and like rooted through the treasure, and the beholder just blasted it to smithereens. But they need that head part of the key. Spell magic would be against a spell level 9. Yes, indeed. That's why it's DC 19. I wouldn't tell him where it is until it speaks or attacks. Sorry, I'm catching up on chat right now. I do plan on having it have a villain monologue because I think that's just fun. I like those a lot. I want to have some personality in here. None of the well, I guess we had Withers, but not since Withers have we had like any monsters or anything engage with the players. And I mean, beholders are intelligent. I think he would absolutely fuck with the players. But I want to do a twist and have it be that the party's going to think he's stupid and like hiding under this sheet to like hide away from the players, and then they're going to be drawn into a false sense of security. One problem I have is I'm still not sure how this actual graphic works. It looks like this is the ball right here, and then the sheet is somehow segmented around it, but that's obviously not nearly big enough to hold a beholder underneath, so I'm not quite sure how to even look at this, unless this whole thing is supposed to be, which that would make more sense. I don't know. It's a weird fucking graphic here. It's bugging me. But I do plan on having it speak, and then once we're in combat, it could also speak, but it can move around. So you could have it attack, speak, and then move. And for its legendary actions, which it does have, where it can shoot a random eye ray, which it can do that 3 times. So on its turn, it can shoot 3 eye rays, and then at some point during the rest of the round, which I realize I'm bad about running legendary creatures. I really need to do better this time. I mean, I'm well aware of my strengths and weaknesses as a DM, and running like high concept boss battles is a huge weakness of mine. So I'm going to really try hard on this, which is why we're spending all this crafting annihilation talking about it. I want to keep track and make sure it's blasting and using those legendary actions, so it uses all 3 of them every round. But I'm going to flavor it like it's the wall. It's those wall eye stalks coming out of all the purple mold, which I've already teased earlier in this level, so that they are actually shooting out. So they can't use the legendary actions to actually pinpoint where the beholder is. It'll just be all those wall eye stalks coming out and shooting, and it's just the whole place will just be covered in purple mold, so it's not avoiding any of that. Although they still follow the random D10 rule, which is a bizarre thing for an intelligent creature. It like can't decide what rays it uses.